The box office has not turned out to be what Hollywood had hoped. Now that summer is over, they're counting the receipts and they're getting real nervous. This article has been making the rounds. Summer box office clobbered by kryptonite. Domestic revenue barely matches last year. Whatever happened to the mantra, survive until 25? The go to refrain for theater owners and Hollywood executives trying to remain optimistic when the box office kept slumping last year, with revenue lagging well behind pre pandemic levels. Perhaps the mantra disappeared this summer when it became clear that not even the likes of Superman or even bigger and scarier dinosaurs could save the day. As the summer season wraps on September 1st, Hollywood is facing the worst case scenario. May to Labor Day ticket sales in North America barely matched the 3.67 billion collected in 2024, even if the deficit was only 7 million. Piling it on, Universal and Amblin's re-release of Steven Spielberg's 50-year-old Jaws beat two new studio films domestically over Labor Day. So here you see the headline that just dropped today. Weapons is still number one, or I think it became number one again, which was a very good movie. But that's a weird movie to be number one on Labor Day weekend with all of these tentpole movies out. I mean, that's kind of like a small horror movie. It's good. It's good. I mean, I'm glad to see a smart horror movie at number one, but it definitely indicates the industry is changing.
Yeah, and it's been out for a while.
It's been out for a few weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
And Jaws was number two. It beat out Darren Aronofsky's new movie open this weekend in third behind 50-year-old Jaws.
Spielberg, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah. Honestly, I mean, we've been a little busy. Yeah, like I would go see Jaws at a movie theater. There's a novelty factor to that. It also says a lot that a 50-year-old movie not it outperformed, and now they're re-releasing Back to the Future in theaters in IMAX. I think you're going to start to see this. Like, if Hollywood sees they can make money off these old movies because nobody likes the new stuff, they're going to start doing this. They're going to start repackaging it until the novelty wears off.
That'd be fun. Back to the Future is one of my favorites. That's an amazing movie. Although it's funny, there's a plot hole at the end of Back to the Future that's just so funny in retrospect. He's like, he goes back in time. He has to go back to the future to save the doc, right? He has to warn the doc that the terrorists are going to shoot him. So he's like, I got to get there. I got to get there on time. Wait a minute. I'm in a time machine. I can have all the time I want. 10 minutes ought to do it. Like, you had all the time you needed. You gave yourself 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Could have given yourself half a day.
Why not go back 6 months?
Go the day before, get a hotel, chill out, relax. Yeah, I got all the time I want. Yeah, 10 minutes. That ought to be enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's pretty funny for a man who moved heaven and earth to get home 36 hours earlier to make this argument. Because if there's anyone with a time machine who would limit it to 10 minutes, it would be Keaton Weiss.
Yeah, well, yeah, 10 minutes will work. Yeah.
All had assumed this year's summer lineup would have the strength to equal or surpass the 4.9 billion grossed in summer 2023. But it isn't to be, leaving studio execs and exhibitors in a state of shock as they wrestle with how to operate in a new world order where moviegoing might never return to pre-COVID levels. It won't. One studio that's still smiling is Warner Brothers, which has had a dazzling winning streak. They used the wrong word there. Yeah, they're really exaggerating. As I predicted a while back, I didn't think Superman would bomb. I thought it was going to underperform, and it did indeed underperform. I mean, that's just the way things have been trending with Hollywood and with that genre in general. I think Minecraft was theirs, and I think also Weapons is theirs. So yeah, they're doing better than others, but even they're not doing great. Quote, I'm very, very nervous for the future, says one top studio executive. There are all these studios and companies making movies. I don't think there is enough of an audience for them. That is not a sentiment theater owners or many other studios share. They think the solution is more product delivered to their big screens. Uh, Quote, I don't think the studio system will fill the gap that started from the pandemic, says the founder and CEO of Just Watch. It's not as mass a market anymore. It's about an even smaller group of people going to the movies more often. So there's a lot more streaming and watching at home. That's part of it. Before the pandemic, a studio could rely on the foreign box office to make up for any lost ground stateside. China alone could pony up 100 to 200 million, if not more, in receipts. These days, a Western title is considered a hit if it earns 50 million at the Chinese box office. Studio insiders say a raft of other markets in Asia have soured on US movies as local content flourishes. That includes South Korea and markets across Southeast Asia. One startling example, Hollywood titles used to make up 50% of the box office revenue in Vietnam. Now it's just 14%. The downturn has hurt superhero picks in particular, explaining the lackluster offshore performance of Marvel's Fantastic Four First Steps and DC Studios' Superman. In 2024, 6 of the top 10 highest grossing studio movies earned 60% or more of their total earnings from the foreign box office. This year so far, that number is 3 out of the top 10. That's a far cry from pre pandemic 2019, when 8 of the top 10 studio films hit that threshold. Superman films have always been a tough proposition because of the comic book character's pro American legacy. But even Man of Steel earned nearly 57% of its 670 million global haul from the foreign box office. This summer's Superman, a mere 43%. Okay, so we have a little more, but just to pause for a second. You have a lot of things going on that are creating a perfect storm for Hollywood that indeed they are the industry as it existed is never coming back. Now one of the most obvious things is you're seeing a shift in the form of entertainment people take in that you probably haven't seen any equivalent to since the invention of television. When they invented movies, that was bad for live theater. And when they invented television, that was bad for movies. Now, we still have theater, we still have movies, but they never got back the central place in the culture that they did relative to the new mediums that displaced them. People watch a lot more TV than movies, and a lot more movies than theater, and so on. The industry will continue to exist just like the film and the theater industry continue to exist. It's going to be much smaller. Now it's partly people taking in things like YouTube and so on. Something Justine Bateman said in a very interesting article um, is something else is going to be invented that we don't even know what it is yet that's going to replace this. I went to the St. Louis Art Museum the other night, and Friday nights, they have kind of a big event thing where they have different things you can experiment with. So they had a VR thing where you could try this VR. So I signed up for it. I did it, and it was you were on a space station. Yo, like that. A lot of you have probably tried it. I've tried VR, but never VR that good. Yeah, it really tricked my whole body into thinking that I was literally in danger. Like it was so
Hmm.
immersive that it
Yeah.
felt like I was really there. It is I'm surprised it hasn't really happened yet, but it's only a matter of time before filmmakers are going to experiment with VR. I would imagine it hasn't happened yet because of the expense. It's probably exorbitant to try to film a whole movie that way. But you could one day, man, I saw artist renderings of that back in the 80s of people sitting there in what they conceived of as VR helmets in a collective theater. Like, you're going to see completely different forms of entertainment that don't even exist yet. So this industry, yeah, it is a dying industry in terms of the form that it existed in previously. Now, what the nerd channels will tend to focus on is what Gary gets into here. Hollywood produces complete shit. Why aren't men showing up? Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. That's part of it. It is kind of interesting. I do think part of what happened with content is it used to be very rich upper class people considered being a performer very gauche, right? That's something you leave to the lower classes. You know, go perform for a crowd, right? And there were some exceptions. There was always the rich girl who ran off to join the circus, but for the most part, people who wound up in entertainment came from the people, so they were
Right.
sensitive to the people's tastes. You go and you look at the backstories of a lot of these old Hollywood directors. A lot of them came from the Lower East Side. They came from the slums. Even if you go all the way to George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, they were middle class. They were from middle class suburbs, so they were tuned into that. And if you look at their movies, it very much is geared to the taste of people from that kind of background, which, when we still had a middle class, was a huge audience for things like E.T., that would find a neighborhood like that relatable and something they identified with. What happened, I think, is wealthy, high status people are attracted to high status gigs. And as being a media celebrity, a movie star, a filmmaker became the coolest thing to be, they wanted to be that too. And they used their money and their connections to infiltrate it and to bring their out of touch sensibility and tastes to entertainment. And I think that's a big part of why the kind of content they're making today has probably never been as out of touch with popular taste as it is. I think that's how that happened. I think people who in the past, in the early days of the industry, never would have gone into that industry, certainly not en masse, wound up taking it over and ruining it because they don't understand how to create for large populations. Um, they think they can dictate the taste of their class. But there's another. Do you want to say anything before I go on to that?
No, it's okay.
Okay, so this, in terms of international box office, we've been talking a lot about how, hey, a lot of America's power was always soft power. You look at these movies. I always think of The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy. It came out when I was a teenager. And I remember it, I think, because I bought it. I bought the message where he's sitting with the old Asian wise man. This is how you absorb all this propaganda, right? It's programmed into everything in the culture. And he says, "Oh, you Americans, so much power and so little idea what to do with it." And it's selling an idea of America, but you have to remember that idea was not just sold to Americans, maybe not even principally to Americans. It was sold to the world. This idea of America as this place of idealism, and when we do things wrong, it's by accident, and it's the land of opportunity, and everyone has a shot here. People bought that around the world. I mean, you could see it in the numbers. If you look at the polling on America throughout most of my life, it was overwhelmingly positive in most countries around the world. The fact that in Vietnam, a country where we launched a genocidal war, our films were the dominant films in their cinema until relatively recently, tells you how effective that American soft power was. As the American brand becomes increasingly toxic around the world, so are all of our exports, including our cultural exports. I think it's going to extend further than that. I think nobody's going to want to own American anything. Nobody's going to want to be seen in an American car. No one's going to want to be seen in American clothing brands. That's where I think we're going. And this is the canary in the coal mine. because it's the most responsive to an immediate social shift like that. People already have certain cars that they're invested in. But box office, that's very responsive to a shift in public mood. And I think this is the leading edge of something you're going to see in a lot of other areas. So this is from Pew. Ratings of the US have basically collapsed. I mean, you can see all the down arrows in 1 year, from 2024 to 2025. 32 points in Mexico from 61 to 29. Sweden, 47 to 19. Poland, we're still above water, but even there, 77 down to 55. The only places we're up are Israel, Turkey, and Nigeria. Every place else in this poll, our public stature has collapsed and whose stature is rising. China isn't, this is from Ipsos. China is now seen as a more positive influence than the US. It's the first time this has been the case during the 10 years we've tracked this question. Across the 29 countries covered, an average of 49% say China will have a positive effect on world affairs, up 10 points from 6 months ago. Israel and Iran remain the countries least likely to be seen as having a positive influence on the international arena. Iran's score has, however, improved over the last 6 months, as have those of China, Pakistan, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. So, largely a basket of countries that are seen as being antagonistic to the United States, as you would expect, are having their popularity improve. And when you look at those Vietnam numbers, where it's gone from 50% to 14% American movies, well, whose movies do you think are filling that gap? I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think they have an enormous film industry in Vietnam to fill that. I would imagine a lot of those films are coming from China and maybe South Korea, which also has a large enough film industry to supplant the United States supply. This is a canary in the coal mine to what you are going to see much more broadly. Tariffs or no tariffs, people around the world are going to stop buying American. Something that Trump and fascists generally never seem to understand is how important it is for people to think well of you, how much power you gain from people having a good opinion. Uh, they Every problem for them is a nail that they want to approach with a hammer. And the world, I think, is responding partly by no longer consuming our media.
Well, yeah, just like tourism is a canary in the coal mine, entertainment, these things are
Sure.
always like leading
Right.
indicators,
Right.
for sure, in terms of like a global reputation, because they're the most immediately responsive to direct in the moment
Exactly.
feedback,
Exactly.
right? In terms of like, tickets, I mean, I imagine private equity, real estate driving inflation is another one. I mean, what is the ticket now in New York City to go see a movie?
I mean, it's a lot. It's like $20.
Okay, that's
Go to a
actually less
movie.
than I thought it would be, because when I left the city, it was like 17. So I would think if inflation kept up, it would go even higher. But I guess there's a ceiling on like how much they can charge. Like you can't charge people $30 to go see a movie, right? They just won't pay that.
Well, but hey, I can see it because I've been in Manhattan pretty much forever, like since I got out of college with a couple of breaks. Um, when when I would go to the movies in the 90s, even on a weekday, I always had to book it in advance in Manhattan because
Oh yeah,
it would sell out,
yep.
or you would
People
get a
would go
terrible
all the
seat.
time. Yeah.
Now I can go on a weekend and not reserve it, and the theater is like half empty.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's got to be a noticeable difference there, because you're right. Movies theaters in New York were always busy. Always, even when I lived there, they were
Packed.
always busy. Yeah, it was always half a house at least.
Yep.
Even to see like a matinee on a weekday, whatever, it would be half a house. Yeah. So yeah, that is definitely a marked difference for sure.
Please clap.